What's up, guys? This is Sons of Thunder 3000, and tonight,
And Nightwing?
yeah, we were doing a duo commentary story thingy. Parts of this will be on my channel, parts of this will be on his. Go watch it.
Yeah, we'll provide links in the description. Harrison actually found this today and called me up and said, let's read this. And then we came up with the brilliant idea of recording it while we read it.
Yeah, like we read like the first paragraph, and we're like, you know what? This is just awesome. Let's read it.
Yeah, because if it's My Little Ponies, which I don't get, and Lord of the Rings, which I think is awesome,
Yeah,
really, really funny.
like a boss.
Okay. So, yeah, you're just going to have to watch this and see what you think. Let's start.
Alright. I will be doing the voices, and Nightwing will be doing the narration part because he is good at that.
Yeah, well, we may slip up and cover over the other's tracks, and I'm sure we're going to get some of these pronunciations wrong, so kind of bear with us.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fan fiction. Proper
And
grammar.
it's Lord of the Rings, where there's a lot of weird names.
Like Minas Tirith.
No, it's Minas Tirith, I think.
No.
Already arguing about
Illuminated.
it.
Gondor.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Here we're going to start the story. The early morning sun that rose over Minas Tirith illuminated the great city. Aside from the patrolling guardsmen and early risen citizens, the rest of the populace had not yet woken. With the roar of the ring won, and most of Middle-earth's troubles ended, all were able to rest peacefully, men, elves, and dwarves alike. The times of warfare and strife had ended. The times of peace and prosperity would now begin. However, the old wizard who stood atop the city was anything but relaxed. He had come to Gondor to oversee the reconstruction of the city at Aragorn's request. The destroyed buildings had been reconstructed, and little work remained to be done. Knowing this, Gandalf retired from his task with permission from the king. He used this time to think and decide his next course of action. True, Sauron had been banished from Middle-earth, and his minions had been routed. Gandalf had succeeded in assisting the forces of good in their battle against the Dark Lord, and for once in his ancient life, he relished in the victory, humble as he was. Seeing the land and people thrive once again filled his heart with a sense of joy and pride at his role in helping create this reality. These were feelings which he had not experienced in quite some time. But unlike most other beings that saw the end of this war, Gandalf did not feel a true sense of closure. He had unfinished business to attend to, not here in Middle-earth, but in another land. Oh, boy.
A plethora.
A plethora of thoughts
Swam.
Thank you.
Oh, that's such a hard word. Swam, baby.
Swag, baby, swag.
Swag.
Not really swim. A plethora of thoughts swam through his mind as he raised his pipe to his mouth and smoked.
Oh, smoking's
Try to
bad.
tell him it's bad for your health.
Unless you're a wizard, then it's good for you.
Yeah, you can always kill yourself later. A rich aroma of pipe weed. I'm sure that's wrong.
No, that's correct.
I don't think that's the same as it was in the story.
Yeah.
It was something.
I think in Middle Earth, weed was like not illegal. It was like wizard potion,
No,
maybe.
there was some kind of special term for it, and I don't think it was pipe weed. I think it was something else.
Well, this guy did say he's only watched the movies.
That's true. Anyway, the rich aroma of pipe weed soothed him. With a sigh, he puffed, and the smoke took form of a sailing galleon. Like making its short journey through the air, he chuckled. He remembered
Performing
the same trick while smoking with Bilbo before the fellowship had been formed. Other memories of his old friend then came to his mind. Their treacherous adventure in the Lonely Mountain, in particular. The wizard chuckled. Though he wielded great power, he treasured his memories far more. He sighed again as he eyed the burning tobacco in his pipe. Realization dawned upon him again. The War of the Ring was over. It wouldn't be long before he sailed west to depart Middle-earth alongside others who would accompany him. A year had passed since the war's end, and his time in Earth was wasting. He had a very important task to complete in another place, a promise to keep. He heard footsteps on the soft grass of the courtyard behind him. Someone was approaching him. He turned to see Faramir, the former captain of Gondor's Rangers and the new steward of Gondor. A much more fitting man to fill the role, Gandalf mused, remembering Faramir's insane father. Unlike Denethor, is that right?
Denethor. Let's go with that.
Yeah. Seems like it was pronounced somehow else. Anyway, Denethor.
Unlike that guy with the D.
Okay.
Mr. D.
The former steward of Gondor. We'll go with that. Unlike Denethor. Crud. Unlike Denethor, that's going to be mispronounced horribly.
Well, hey, the main part is the ponies.
Who met a fiery end brought upon himself by his own machinations. Faramir was a very fair and reasonable steward. The much younger man looked at Gandalf with concern in his eyes.
Mithridir, there's something troubling you, is there not? He asked.
The wizard smiled wryly.
I would not go so far as to say troubling, but there are, indeed, certain causes of concern. Yes.
This alarmed Faramir.
Is there another danger, even now, after the Dark Lord has been vanquished?
The wizard shook his head, still
Unfailingly cheerful.
Thank you, in his demeanor.
No. There's no danger. Middle-earth has seen enough bloodshed.
He watched as the young steward visibly calmed, and then continued.
The causes of concern I refer to are of my affairs only. I see.
Faramir replied. The wizard had saved his life more than once during the War of the Ring, and so he found himself obligated to offer his assistance.
Is there anything I can do to help you?
Gandalf shook his head, his long white beard swaying as he did so.
No, I do not believe so. All that is required of me is a visit to a few old friends of mine. Really? Simply visit to friends?
Faramir asked. A note of disbelief had crept into his voice as he found it doubtful that a being as powerful and complicated as Gandalf would need to contemplate the circumstances of such an easy task. Also, who were these friends he referred to?
That is all?
The wizard chuckled.
Why, yes, though.
His voice turned to a mumble.
Reaching them is a rather convoluted matter. What? Nothing.
Gandalf said quickly. He turned away from Faramir and stared out towards the fields before the city, surveying them. He frowned slightly. Remnants of the battle of Pelennor fields remained scattered across the soil, marring the beautiful landscape.
Regardless, I must leave Minas Tirith soon. What? Where will you be heading? Asked
Faramir. The white-robed wizard did not turn to look back at him. Instead, Gandalf's eyes shifted toward the rising sun. He smiled.
A place called Equestria.
He could feel Faramir's curious stare on him. The former soldier was doubtlessly clueless. But that did not trouble Gandalf in the least. His mind was elsewhere, filled with fleeting memories of his time in that bright, beautiful land.
Equestria? I've never heard of such a place.
He heard Faramir say. Unsurprisingly, Gandalf thought. His mind turned to preparations. Shadowfax's speed was a great boon as the Limbas bred. He would only need a bit of the nutritious elven food, and thankfully he had amassed a large supply of it. Perhaps he would carry more in case it came to be of use.
Mithrandir?
Faramir asked. The wizard quickly turned to his comrade.
Yes? My apologies. I'm simply considering some things. Such as? And what if this Equestria that you speak of?
The suspicion in his voice was unmistakable.
To answer your first question, I am contemplating the necessary provisions for my journey. To answer your second,
He paused briefly and then continued.
Equestria is the home of the friends I am visiting.
Faramir was getting exasperated. The wizard's near cryptic answers were irritating, as were the countless other questions they had formed.
Who are these friends? What is Equestria? Why have I never known of it?
He asked. His voice was slightly louder, and his brow was furrowed in extreme confusion. When Gandalf did not reply, he called the name he knew him by.
Mithrandir!
Much to his relief, Gandalf spoke.
Unfortunately, I cannot answer the vast majority of your questions. I made a promise, and I intend not to break it.
Faramir's head was swarming with questions now, but he merely nodded. It was no longer worth pursuing. Gandalf patted reassuringly on his armored shoulder. His cheerfulness returned.
Look to the future, Faramir,
Was all he said. He turned to leave.
How soon are you leaving?
Asked Faramir.
I'm sorry.
He began to follow Gandalf.
I am taking my leave to prepare, and hopefully depart within the hour.
Gandalf replied. He slowed his pace so that Faramir could walk beside him. He glanced at the steward and saw a look of astonishment.
So soon? The sun had just begun to rise.
The earlier I depart, the fewer questions asked.
Was Gandalf's reply. They walked past the white tree and descended the stairs to the level beneath them. Gandalf's staff sent echoes through the stone city as it clipped and clopped against the stairs, against the floor.
Men are curious things, after all. It is their nature.
It's beings, not thingings.
Okay. Beans.
Faramir and Gandalf were hailed by a group of guards, and they responded in kind. The odd looks that were shot at the pair were not missed by either. Faramir nodded.
I see what you mean. But why is such secrecy required?
They descended a long stare.
It seems that you wish to keep even the simple fact that you are on an errand a secret, and Nightwing keeps trying to read over me.
My bad. Gandalf's brow furrowed.
A wizard's errand.
Are never. Oh, not again.
Look, see. When there are these little explanation thingies, those things, huh?
Quotation marks?
Yeah, when the quotation marks, that means it's my turn to talk.
Yeah, at least he's got the editing right.
Yeah. Some
Sorry.
don't even put that. Okay, well, as you were saying, Gandalf's brow furrowed. A wizard's errand are never simple, Faramir. But yes, I'm treating this matter with discretion, and...
He looked around briefly to see if there were any possible eavesdroppers. Saying none, he continued in a low whisper.
It would be much appreciated if you would keep all that I have revealed to yourself.
Faramir nodded in agreement.
You have your reasons, and I will respect them.
Okay, just a quick comment. I haven't seen the movies or books in a while, so I forget who Faramir is, so I'm just making up a voice. To all those people that are big fans, I'm sorry I'm not doing him justice.
I remember who he is partially, but yeah, I don't remember the voice either.
I'm guessing he did not sound like Dumbledore from the Potter Puppet House.
Is that how Dumbledore sounded? I haven't seen that.
He did in a YouTube spoof. But anyway.
Where were we?
I thank you.
Gandalf said, gratified. He gazed briefly toward the
Pelennor.
Field.
Pelennor Fields. Let's go
Okay,
back.
we'll go with that. Pelennor Fields. The sun was rising steadily, and he knew he would have to hasten. His walk quickened as he addressed his companion.
I am off to my quarters. I will ready my supplies there.
I will take my leave then. I will await you at the Great Gate.
No!
Gandalf said firmly.
The appearance of the steward and at the Great Gate alongside a wizard will attract more attention than my presence alone will.
He faced Faramir, his staff firmly gripped in his arms.
Let us bid each other farewell here.
The former ranger bowed at the feet of the white rider and then rose. He smiled at the wise old being before him and wished him well.
Be safe, Mithrandir. No matter where your travels may take you.
Gandalf gave a brief bow.
Keep Gondor safe, Faramir. I shall return.
He turned to leave before quickly turning. One more thing on his mind.
Also, if anyone asks, tell them I'm visiting Tom. Tom Bombadil. What kind of a name is Tom Bombadil?
I don't know. Faramir blinked. So many questions.
Who is Tom?
That Gandalf either didn't hear him or simply ignored him, for he turned heel and walked away without another word.
I would too, because Faramir's voice is very annoying.
Gandalf's quarters were, in fact, a decent-sized home. The building had been erected alongside others following the destruction of much of the city during the siege of Minas Tirith, and had been sculpted out of marble. By the standards of most, the building was artfully designed and beautifully decorated, but Gandalf cared little for arts or architecture. He always found himself lacking time to do so. He stood before a small assortment of goods, which he decided were ample supplies for his journey. There wasn't much. 6 large loaves of limbus bread, his pipe, his cloak, and a few different packets of pipeweeds. He stroked his beard as he considered his options. He muttered under his breath,
Should I bring more limbus? No. More old Toby, perhaps.
He reached into a small cupboard nearby and produced a tiny brown bag of the fragrant tobacco.
This is very related to My Little Pony. 'Cause, you know, they smoke all the time in that show. Yeah, Hasbro, with the new My Little Pony brand cigarettes.
Oh, brother. He slowly lifted it out before grunting in frustration and setting it back down. He sighed wearily and wished the Fellowship was here with him. The hobbits had returned to the Shire. Legolas and Gimli.
Legolas.
That can't be right.
Yeah, it's Legolas, dude.
Oh, I'm trying to figure out if it's Gimli. I'm thinking of it.
Gimli!
Anyway, Legolas and Gimli had ventured off to parts unknown, though he had heard talk of them traveling to Helm's Deep, and Aragorn was now King Esselar of Gondor. Gandalf frowned. He scolded himself harshly for nearly neglecting the memory of Boromir. At any rate, they were far more efficient than he was when it came to deciding what was necessary and what was not on a journey. Well, at least some of them were efficient. He remembered the foolish arguments that the 4 hobbits would have when they were unable to agree on what should be brought. After a few more moments of deliberation, Gandalf grabbed a small knapsack and tossed the bread in while keeping the pipe and tobacco within his cloak.
This is much too mundane a task for me,
He muttered. He donned his cloak and then slung the knapsack over his back. He turned to leave. He felt prepared. When his hand touched the doorknob, however, he paused.
Nearly forgot.
He mumbled, grimacing slightly. He walked over to a short, simple wooden closet that lay against a wall and opened it. A small, long box made of oak wood lay within it, as did a sealed bag. He opened his knapsack and deposited the box within it, while he wore the other bag under his cloak. He smiled warmly as he reviewed the contents of each container in his mind. He figured that his 2 friends would greatly appreciate the gifts. The wind whipped around the White Rider and his steed as they rode. The journey, as he predicted, was fast. They stopped very little, only taking the occasional rest over the course of days that they rode. At this moment, they passed through the border between Gondor and Rohan. Gandalf saw the familiar outline of Edoras, Rohan's capital in the distance.
I'm sure there are a bunch of Lord of the Rings fans really getting mad right now. Like, that's not what it's called! That's not what it sounds like!
I know Rohan, I'm pronouncing correctly, but yeah, I'm sure you're right.
Well, you know what? Just use your imagination. If you know what it is, you know what it is.
Yep. The people of Rohan were known colloquially as the Rohirrim, and they were known throughout the land as famed horse masters and breeders. Appropriately, Rohan's fighters were largely composed of horsemen, who had turned the tide during several key battles during the War of the Ring, and ultimately proved themselves to be a great factor in the victory of men against Sauron's forces. Here, Horses were revered to such an extent that icons of horses had been incorporated into Rohan's art and architecture, and they were generally a vital part of Rohan's culture. At Gandalf's urging, Shadowfax slowed to a stop atop a hill. The wizard proceeded to survey the surrounding lands. The noon sun hung over Middle-earth today, and light was cast across the entire land. Gandalf saw far and spotted the great forest that lay north of Edoras. Fanghorn Forest. He was almost there. In the distance, Gandalf watched a group of Rohan's cavalry ride out from Eldoras's gates and into the plains. Their armor and weapons gleamed in the sunlight, and they rode their horses proudly. Gandalf felt the earth quake slightly beneath his feet as they galloped powerfully into Middle-earth.
How appropriate that Equestria's entrance lay within Rohan's borders.
Gandalf was anticipant of the near future.
Dude, I would too. Going to Equestria? That would be awesome.
That's you, not me.
You will someday.
Yeah, someday. Though Fanghorn Forest was feared by much of Middle-earth, Gandalf never found it to be intimidating in the slightest, largely due to the fact that he was older than the entire fort itself. That's one old guy.
Or maybe it's just a young forest. Maybe it's like Minecraft. It's like plant a seed. The next day, you have a tree.
Good point. And had known it when it was but a single tree. He stood at the edge of the woods, with Shadowfax beside him. The Dark Lord's defeat and the expelling of his influence from Middle-earth changed the mood of the forest itself, and it was no longer as menacing as it once was, though most would still not dare to venture into it. Gandalf turned to his steed and caressed his mane. The stallion stared at its master expectantly.
Shadowfax!
Gandalf said affectionately.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was not really affectionately how I said it. Let me try it again. Shadowfax. Gandalf
said affectionately.
I will now go forth alone. When I return, so shall my call. Go!
The horse neighed.
Nay!
The horse neighed, then turned and trotted away from the forest. Gandalf watched the form of his horse disappear into the distance, then turned back to face the forest. The old woods were not threatening to him, and in fact, he had quite a few acquaintances here. Gandalf walked forward, completely at ease as he entered the forest. He heard the leaves crush underneath his boot as he stepped, and then another as his other foot fell. The forest was very dark, most light eliminated by the great trees. Aside from the occasional rustle of movement in the distance, there was utter silence. Like that. To Gandalf, it was peaceful here. He continued onwards, making sure to keep his distance from the trees. Though unlikely, he would hate to be stepped on by a fidgeting int. He walked through the dark woods, observing and listening silently, focusing on his surroundings. He hoped that he would catch a glimpse of Treebeard, but it seemed as if the entire forest was still today, ents, trees alike. He wondered if it was because of his presence, but did not give the issue much thought. The woods began to grow denser and darker, which Gandalf knew meant that he was reaching the forest's heart. He continued steadily through the ancient woods until there was utter darkness. He could barely see, yet such a disadvantage only made him smile. He was getting closer and closer. He raised his staff, aiming it into the dark, and a bright light shined from the top. He peered into the illuminated depths and smiled.
Ah, there it is.
He had reached the foot of the mountains that overlooked Fanghorn. The great peaks could not be seen. Any view of the sky was completely obscured by the dense trees. Gandalf only realized that he had reached it due to the fact that he had reached his ultimate destination, the entrance into a cave that stood before him, huge and hollow, in the side of the mountain. At first sight, it appeared to be no different than any other cavern in existence, but Gandalf knew better. Closing his eyes, he leaned forward slightly, turning his head and cupping his ear so that he may focus on what he could hear. From deep within the cavern, he heard echoes of birds chirping, as well as the rustling of trees.
So here I am.
He mumbled. beaming at the black void in front of him. He knew it to be the entrance of a tunnel. He breathed in deeply and turned to gaze behind him into the depths of the forest. He hoped to return to Middle-earth soon, and somewhat regretted that he could not view the landscape again. At this time, which Gandalf estimated to be dusk, it was likely
breathtakingly beautiful.
Thank you. He took a moment to remember the great mountains that stretched over the grassy lands, now purged of evil forever. Without another word, Gandalf the White stepped forward into the great cave, into Equestria.
Oh! Yay! You're in Equestria with the ponies.
Though he had walked this path once, Gandalf did not find the walk any less tedious. It was long, just as long as he remembered, and just as dark. There was no light other than that which emanated from his staff. His boots walked steadily on the hard stone of the tunnel's floor. Yet the cavern was warm, and there was continuous echoes of birdsong and wind. The wizard was smiling expectantly. With each step, he was moving closer. His eyes were set on the darkness in front of him, for he knew that sooner or later he would see a very bright light. The bright light at the end of the tunnel, don't you know?
Yeah, like a boss.
Then he saw it. At first, it was merely a speck of white in the black of his vision, but it grew as he walked. His heart was beating with excitement and joy, which was a sensation that more than surprised him. He had never quite experienced it, aside from during the occasional moments in his long history, where he would see a dear friend of his. The end of the tunnel could now be seen. It was a blinding white light which Gandalf had seen in his dreams, one that he missed. A low, hearty laugh rose from his throat.
The light's at the end of the tunnel, literal and metaphorical.
And then the bright light shined into his eyes. He raised his hand to shield his vision, but kept his pace. The light began to envelop him. He felt warm and comfortable inside. He took a deep breath and lowered his hand, looking into the bright light. His eyes did not sting any longer. Instead, his vision changed so that all he saw was silver glass, covering every inch of the tunnel. He closed his eyes as he felt the warmth inside of him turn to heat, but not a heat that may scorch. Its comfort did not falter. He knew that here he would change. He did not open his eyes, but kept walking. Then he heard the noise of steady clops made by hooves hitting hard rock. He knew what that meant. He waited until the echoes of birds and tree leaves rustling grew, until they surrounded him. No longer echoes, but sound that surrounded him. He breathed in. He smelled grass as well as wet soil. He opened his eyes and looked down. He no longer wore the appearance of a man. His limbs ended with hooves, and his body was now quite equine in nature. Equine, for those who don't know, means horse.
Well, pretty much everyone knows, because it's like Equestria, all that stuff. But if they don't, then why are you watching this? No, I'm just kidding.
Though his white robes and cloak remained on him, his skin was covered by a pure white coat, and both his long white hair and beard remained. Though he realized that he would have to refer to his hair as his mane, he frowned slightly. Though his heart soared with glee, he would need a bit of time to adjust to his new body. Though he had been a pony once before, at this thought he looked upwards, going cross-eyed to examine the pure white horn that stood atop his head. Ouch. He smirked. Thankfully, he still had his staff in hoof. That was written. That wasn't my fault. That was written.
It's like, well, thankfully he saw his staff and hair in hoof.
Thank you. You can do those better than I can.
Yeah.
He looked around him. A vast forest surrounded him, and he knew it wasn't. He knew that it was not Fanghorn.
Ever free,
he said. These woods were familiar to him, though they were rather unknown in comparison to those of Fanghorn. He was finally, truly, in Equestria again. His heart filled with happiness as he spotted the great city of Canterlot on the side of a mountain in the distance, far from the forest that he stood in. A gust of wind flew in his face, and his beard flowed in the wind. His eyes beamed at the bright new world, and the familiar castle that housed the two Alicorns that he promised to return to.
Celestia, Luna, I have returned. Author's note. All will be explained in the future or in PMs if necessary. Hope I didn't do too badly, and my other stories will be updated soon. Pinky promise.
End of chapter 1.
Well, that was pretty cool. I can't wait to see how this turns out. How about you?
Heck yeah.
I kind of wish we got to see more of the ponies, but I mean, we needed a good introduction, and that was a really good introduction.
Yep. We're going to split this up into 2 parts.
Well, however many parts there is.
What?
However many parts there are.
Yeah, that's true. So, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you guys for listening to our fan fiction, The White Rider. It was written by Ascension Call on the friendshipismagicfiction.net website. We will link it in the description below. Go give this person some support. They did a good job.
Yes, they did. I mean, like, there was almost no grammatical errors.
Except from us.
Yeah, except from us.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, if you don't want to hear us messing up, we'll link the actual story. You can go read it yourself. And you'll get it to be able to read when it updates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Apparently it's incomplete, but there's like 4,000 words per chapter.
Well, this is just the introduction. There could be more.
Yeah. Alright, this has been Nightwing.
And Sons of Thunder 3000.
We will see you next time. Laters.
Bye-bye. Stop recording.